18 black kids went missing on music tour in 1979. 41 years later, a chilling clue emerged in Desert. The summer of 1979 was supposed to change everything for the Soul Echoes. 18 teenagers from Chicago's South Side, they had beaten thousands of other young performers to win a spot on the Rising Voices tour, a cross-country journey designed to showcase emerging black talent to record executives and music lovers across America. Marcus Williams, the group's charismatic lead singer, stood at the front of their rented van as it pulled away from their final hotel in Las Vegas. His voice carried over the excited chatter of his bandmates as he called out, "Next stop, Nevada Desert, y'all! One last show, then we're heading home as stars." Behind him, Dana Faye Carter adjusted her backup singer's headset and smiled nervously. At 16, she was one of the youngest members of the group, but her voice could make grown men weep. She joined the Soul Echoes just 8 months earlier, when their original backup singer moved to New York. Now, squeezed between her best friend Keisha and drummer Tommy Rodriguez in the van's middle row, she felt like she was living in a dream. "Dana, you ready for this?" Keisha whispered, squeezing her hand. "Mrs. Patterson said there might be A&R people from Motown at this show." Dana's heart skipped. Motown Records, the legendary label that had launched Diana Ross, Stevie Wonder, and Michael Jackson. Could this really be happening to a girl from Cabrini Green? The group had spent 2 months touring small venues across the Midwest and West Coast. They performed a unique blend of gospel harmonies with funk rhythms that made audiences jump to their feet. Their rendition of Amazing Grace, with a bass line that could shake buildings, had become their signature. Music critics called them the sound of tomorrow. But success hadn't come without challenges. Their tour manager, a slick-talking man named Richard Moss, had been making promises about record deals that never materialized. The venues got smaller, the crowds thinner, and the promised payments often came up short. Some of the older members, like 18-year-old Marcus and 17-year-old keyboardist Jennifer Washington, had started whispering about exploitation. "We're being used," Jennifer had confided to Dana the night before. "Rich white men making money off our talent while we sleep in cheap motels and eat gas station food." Still, Dana couldn't shake her excitement as their van wound through the Nevada desert toward their final destination, a charity concert at something called the Harmony Springs Spiritual Music Retreat. The booking agent had described it as an intimate venue near Death Valley, perfect for their gospel funk fusion. Their driver, a quiet local man named Pete, had picked them up that morning in Las Vegas. He'd been hired specifically for this leg of the journey since their regular driver had fallen ill. Pete kept glancing in his rearview mirror with an expression Dana couldn't quite read. "How much further?" asked Tony, their bass player, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the van's struggling air conditioning. "About 2 hours," Pete replied. "Road gets pretty rough once we leave the highway. This place is really out there." As they drove deeper into the desert, the landscape became increasingly desolate. Scrub brush and rocky outcroppings stretched endlessly in every direction. The mountains in the distance shimmered like mirages in the brutal afternoon heat. Marcus started a call and response to keep spirits up. "When I say soul, you say echoes. Soul. Echoes. Soul. Echoes." Their voices filled the van, harmonizing naturally even without instruments. Dana felt tears prick her eyes. These weren't just her bandmates. They were her family. They'd shared cramped hotel rooms, late-night rehearsals, and dreams of making it big together. Around 4 p.m., Pete turned off the main highway onto a dirt road marked only by a weathered wooden sign. "Harmony Springs 15 miles. The van bounced and lurched over potholes and rocks. Everyone held onto their instruments tightly. "This better be worth it," muttered Carlos, their trumpet player, as his horn case slid across the floor. Finally, they crested a small hill and saw their destination, a cluster of rundown buildings surrounding what might once have been a natural spring. A few people moved between the structures, but it was hard to make out details through the heat, haze, and dust. "Doesn't look like much," observed Keisha. "Sometimes the best music comes from the most unexpected places," Marcus said, ever the optimist. As they pulled up to what appeared to be the main building, a tall, thin white man with long gray hair and kind eyes approached the van. He wore simple clothes, jeans and a faded flannel shirt, and moved with the unhurried pace of someone accustomed to desert life. "Welcome, welcome!" he called out as they began unloading their instruments. "I'm Elijah Thompson. I've been so looking forward to hearing you perform. We don't get many visitors out here, let alone artists of your caliber." Dana immediately felt drawn to Elijah's gentle demeanor. Unlike the music industry executives they'd encountered, he seemed genuinely interested in them as people, not just as potential profit. "How many people are we expecting tonight?" Marcus asked, surveying the sparse surroundings. "Well, that's the thing," Elijah said, his smile faltering slightly. "We had to cancel the public event. Some of our regular attendees couldn't make it due to a family emergency in town. But I was hoping you might still be willing to perform for our small community here. Nothing fancy, just sharing your gift with folks who rarely get to experience live music." The group exchanged uncertain glances. They'd traveled hundreds of miles for what was supposed to be their tour finale, only to find an audience of maybe a dozen people scattered around a collection of desert shacks. "What about our payment?" asked Jennifer, always practical. Elijah's expression grew apologetic. "I'm afraid the cancellation means we can't offer the full amount originally promised. But I can provide meals and shelter for the night, and whatever we can spare from our community fund." Dana watched Marcus struggle with the decision. They were exhausted, nearly broke, and still had to make it back to Chicago. But something about Elijah's sincerity touched her heart. "Music isn't about money," she found herself saying. "It's about touching souls." Marcus looked at her and slowly nodded. "Dana's right. We came here to share our gift. Let's do that." As the sun began to set over the desert, the Soul Echoes set up their equipment in what Elijah called the community room, a large space with wooden floors and surprisingly good acoustics. The small audience gathered, other residents of the retreat, all white, all older, all watching with intense interest. 41 years later, Jake Morrison had no idea he was about to solve one of America's most haunting missing persons cases. The 28-year-old travel blogger from Portland was 3 days into filming his Hidden Nevada series, documenting abandoned places and forgotten stories across the Silver State's vast wilderness. "What's up, adventure seekers?" Jake called out to his camera, wiping sweat from his forehead as he trudged through the rocky terrain near Death Valley. "Day 3 of exploring the absolute middle of nowhere, and I'm starting to think my GPS has given up on me entirely." His subscriber count had been climbing steadily. Nearly 50,000 followers loved his mix of urban exploration and historical storytelling. But this particular location, an old dry riverbed he'd found on a 1960s geological survey map, wasn't yielding much content. Just endless rocks, stubborn desert brush, and heat that made his camera equipment almost too hot to touch. Jake had been hiking for 2 hours when something caught his eye. A glint of brown leather partially buried beneath decades of sand and debris near what used to be the riverbank. In the desert, anything man-made was worth investigating. "Hold up, guys," he said to his camera, zooming in on the object. "We might have found something interesting." He knelt down and carefully brushed away the sand, revealing the corner of what appeared to be an old leather backpack. The material was weathered but surprisingly intact, preserved by the dry desert climate. His heart rate quickened. This was exactly the kind of mysterious discovery his viewers loved. "Okay, this is definitely not recent," Jake narrated as he worked to free the backpack from its sandy grave. "The leather looks like it's been here for decades. No telling what we might find inside." As he lifted the pack, Jake was surprised by how heavy it felt. Something substantial was inside. He looked around the desolate landscape, suddenly aware of how alone he was. The nearest road was miles away, and he hadn't seen another human being in 2 days. "Let's see what secrets you've been keeping," he whispered to the camera, his voice barely audible over the desert wind. The backpack's zipper was stuck with decades of grit, but after some careful work, it opened with a sound like tearing fabric. Jake's eyes widened as he saw what was inside. "Holy!" He caught himself before cursing on camera. "Guys, this is incredible." The first item he pulled out was a folded piece of paper, a hand-drawn map of the surrounding canyon region. But it wasn't the map itself that made Jake's hands tremble. Scrawled across the top in faded blue ink were the words, "They weren't supposed to find us." "What does that even mean?" Jake asked his camera, his usual confident demeanor replaced by genuine confusion and growing unease. Beneath the map, he found a stack of Polaroid photographs. As he flipped through them, his breath caught in his throat. The images showed a group of young black teenagers, maybe 18 of them, holding musical instruments and posing in front of a rundown wooden cabin. They were smiling, laughing, full of life and joy. But there was something about their clothing, their hairstyles, the faded quality of the Polaroids themselves that screamed 1970s. "These photos have to be at least 40 years old," Jake said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But who were these kids? And why was this backpack buried out here in the middle of nowhere?" The final item in the backpack made Jake's heart stop entirely. It was a small, cloth-bound diary with a brass clasp, its pages yellowed with age. On the cover, written in careful teenage handwriting, was a name. Dana Faye Carter, Private, do not read. Jake's hands shook as he opened to the first page. The date at the top read, July 15, 1979. 1979. He breathed. "These photos, this diary, they're from 1979. He read the first entry aloud to his camera. "Marcus says we're going to be stars after this tour. I hope he's right. Mama cried when we left Chicago, but she said she was proud. I promised her I'd come home with stories to tell." Jake felt a chill run down his spine despite the desert heat. He quickly flipped through more pages, catching fragments of entries about performances, hotel rooms, dreams of record deals, and names he didn't recognize. But it was the later entries that made his blood run cold. "Something happened to these kids," he said to his camera, his voice barely steady. "This isn't just some old diary. This might be evidence." Jake carefully placed everything back in the backpack, his mind racing. He'd heard stories about missing persons cases, cold cases that had never been solved. But he'd never imagined stumbling across something like this. As he filmed his trek back to his car, Jake couldn't shake the image of those smiling teenagers in the Polaroids. Where were they now? What had happened to Dana Faye Carter? And why had her backpack been buried in this remote corner of the Nevada desert? "I don't know what we found here," he told his camera as he loaded the backpack into his vehicle. "But I have a feeling this is bigger than just a travel blog episode. Those kids in the photos, someone somewhere, has been wondering what happened to them for over 40 years. That night, in his motel room in the nearest town, Jake spent hours researching missing persons cases from 1979. When he finally found the newspaper articles about the Soul Echoes gospel funk group that had vanished without a trace, his hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold his phone. The next morning, he called the Las Vegas Police Department's cold case unit. Within hours, Detective Maria Santos was driving out to meet him, bringing with her a case file that had been gathering dust since 1979. The backpack that Jake Morrison had discovered would soon reignite a nationwide search for answers, drawing the attention of families who had never stopped hoping, investigators who had never stopped wondering, and a media hungry for a mystery that had captivated America decades earlier. Dana Faye Carter's diary was about to tell a story that would change everything anyone thought they knew about what happened to the Soul Echoes in the summer of 1979. Detective Maria Santos had worked cold cases for 15 years, but she'd never seen anything quite like Dana Faye Carter's diary. Sitting in the Las Vegas Police Department's evidence room, she carefully turned each yellowed page while Jake Morrison's camera captured every word for his documentary. "The handwriting changes as the entries progress," Santos observed, adjusting her reading glasses. "Look how neat and hopeful it starts, then becomes more hurried, desperate toward the end." The early entries painted a picture of teenage dreams and typical tour struggles. Dana wrote about missed meals, cramped hotel rooms, and the growing tension between the group's artistic vision and their manager's commercial demands. But it was the entry dated July 20, 1979, 5 days after their final scheduled performance, that made Santos lean forward. "Jake, are you getting this?" she asked, then began reading aloud. "The van broke down about 20 miles from that weird spiritual place. Steam pouring out everywhere, and Pete just threw up his hands and said he was done. We're stranded in the middle of nowhere with all our equipment and no way to get home. Marcus is trying to stay positive, but I can see he's scared too. Then this old white man appeared like something out of a movie. Said his name was Elijah Thompson and he lived nearby. He had kind eyes and offered to help us. What choice did we have? We followed him to his place. It's like a little compound with several buildings. He says he's a music teacher, moved out here after his wife died to find peace in the desert." Santos paused, making notes. "So they didn't make it to their scheduled venue. The van breakdown stranded them, and this Elijah character offered shelter." The next entry, dated July 22nd, revealed how quickly the situation had evolved. "Elijah showed us his recording studio today. It's in this old cabin behind his house, filled with vintage equipment that must be worth thousands. He played us some recordings he made of traveling musicians over the years. The sound quality is incredible, warm and rich like nothing we've heard in professional studios. He asked if we wanted to record some demos just for the experience." Marcus was hesitant, but Jennifer jumped at the chance. "She's been complaining about how the record labels want to change our sound, make us more commercial. Here, Elijah says we could record exactly what we want. Tony found a pay phone in town and called his mom to let everyone know we're safe but might be delayed getting home. The phones here don't work, something about the location interfering with signals." Jake paused his filming. "That's the last contact anyone had with them. Tony's phone call." Santos nodded grimly and continued reading. The entries from late July showed the group settling into an unexpected routine. Dana described long recording sessions, communal meals, and philosophical discussions with Elijah about the corrupting influence of the music industry. "He tells us we have something pure," Dana had written on July 25th. "Says the record companies will destroy that purity, turn us into products instead of artists." Some of the group are starting to believe him. Keisha said maybe we should stay longer, really develop our sound away from all the pressure. But by early August, the tone began to shift. "It's been 3 weeks now. Marcus keeps asking Elijah about getting the van fixed so we can go home, but there's always some excuse. Parts have to be ordered, the mechanic is busy, the road is washed out. I'm starting to feel trapped. Elijah discourages us from hiking into town. Says it's dangerous, that the locals don't understand artistic types and especially don't welcome black kids. He might be right. This is rural Nevada in 1979, but something feels wrong about how he says it." Santos looked up at Jake. "Classic isolation tactics. Cut off communication, create dependency, instill fear of the outside world." The entry that made both Santos and Jake's blood run cold was dated August 10th. "I found out something terrible today. While cleaning the main house, I discovered a box of newspaper clippings hidden in Elijah's bedroom. Articles about missing people, musicians, artists, young people who disappeared while traveling through Nevada over the past decade. All of them had stayed here at some point. I confronted Elijah about it. He got this cold look in his eyes I'd never seen before. Said those people had chosen to disappear because they couldn't handle the pressures of the modern world. Said some people are meant to find peace in the desert. I'm scared. We all are, except for a few who seem completely under his spell. Jennifer actually defended him when I told the group what I found. Said maybe those people found what they were looking for here. This is where it gets really dark." Santos warned Jake before continuing. The final entries Dana had written at Elijah's compound revealed a group fracturing under psychological pressure. August 15th, Marcus finally stood up to Elijah today. Said we're leaving whether the van is fixed or not. We'll walk to town if we have to. About half the group agreed to go with him. The others, led by Jennifer, said they want to stay. They believe Elijah when he says the outside world will destroy our music. Elijah didn't try to stop the ones who wanted to leave. just smiled sadly and said, "The desert has a way of teaching people what they really need to know. I should have gone with Marcus. God, I should have gone with Marcus." Santos set the diary down, her expression grim. The final entry at the compound is dated August 16th. Just 2 words, they're gone. Jake stared at the evidence bag containing the diary. Gone where? What happened to Marcus and the others who tried to leave? That's what we need to find out, Santos replied. But first, we need to read the rest of Dana's story. According to the diary, she didn't stay at Elijah's place much longer after that. The detective carefully turned to the next section of entries, dated weeks later, with a different location noted at the top. Hidden Canyon, August 30th. Dana survived, Jake whispered. But how? And why didn't she ever come forward? Santos's expression was somber as she prepared to read the entries that would reveal the full horror of what happened to the soul echoes in the Nevada desert, and the impossible choice that Dana Faye Carter had to make to survive. Detective Santos turned to the section of Dana's diary marked Hidden Canyon, her hands trembling slightly. The handwriting here was different, shakier, more urgent, as if written by someone pushed to the edge of sanity. August 30th, 1979, Hidden Canyon Shelter. I've been hiding here for 2 weeks now. My water is almost gone, and I keep hearing sounds at night. I don't know if it's animals or something worse. I have to write this down before I lose my mind completely. Marcus never came back. None of them did. That morning when they left, I watched from the window as they walked toward the main road. Marcus was carrying his guitar case, and Carlos had his trumpet. They were singing Amazing Grace as they disappeared over the hill, their voices echoing off the canyon walls. It was the last time I heard them sing. Elijah stood on the porch, watching them go with this terrible smile. He turned to those of us who stayed and said, "Don't worry. The desert will teach them what they need to know." Jake paused his filming. Jesus. He knew something was going to happen to them. Santos nodded grimly and continued reading. August 31st. I'm writing by candlelight. Found some supplies in this old mining shack, but I'm scared to light a fire in case someone sees the smoke. I need to write about what happened after Marcus left, even though it makes me sick to remember. For 3 days, those of us who stayed pretended everything was normal. We recorded music, ate Elijah's meals, and told ourselves that Marcus's group had made it to town safely. But I could see the fear in Jennifer's eyes, even though she kept defending Elijah. On the 4th day, Elijah called us together. He said he had news about our friends. My heart jumped, thinking they'd sent word. Instead, he told us that Marcus and the others had been found by local authorities. Said they'd been accused of theft and were being held in jail. The townspeople don't understand your kind, he said. They see young black kids and assume the worst. Your friends are going to need bail money, legal help. It could take months to sort out. Jennifer started crying. Tony wanted to go to them immediately, but Elijah said it was too dangerous. Said if we showed up, we'd just be arrested too. Santos looked up at Jake. Classic manipulation. Create a crisis, position yourself as the only solution. September 2nd. I couldn't sleep last night, so I went for a walk. That's when I saw the fresh graves. 3 mounds of earth behind the old barn, each marked with a simple wooden cross. The dirt was still dark, recently turned. I counted them twice, hoping I was wrong. 3 graves. Marcus, Carlos, and Keisha. I know it in my bones. I ran back to the cabin and woke up Jennifer. Told her what I'd seen. She looked at me like I was crazy, said they were probably just pet graves or something. But I could see the fear in her eyes. We have to leave, I whispered. Right now, before he comes back. But Jennifer shook her head. Where would we go? We don't have money, transportation, anything. At least here we're safe. Safe. The word made me want to scream. Jake's camera captured Santos's expression as she read the most chilling entry. September 5th. Elijah gathered us together tonight. Only 6 of us left now, Jennifer, Tony, Michael, Lisa, Kevin, and me. He said he had something important to tell us. Your friends who tried to leave, they didn't make it, he said, his voice gentle like he was talking to children. The desert is harsh. They got lost, ran out of water. I found their bodies yesterday. Jennifer broke down sobbing. Tony started shouting, demanding to see the bodies, to call the police. Elijah just stood there, calm as anything. We can't involve the authorities, he said. Think about it. Young black musicians isolated in the desert with a white man. Who do you think they'll blame? We buried them with respect, said prayers over their graves. It's what had to be done. The terrible thing is, part of me believed him. Part of me wanted to believe him, because the alternative was too horrible to accept. But I saw the shovel in his truck. Saw the dirt under his fingernails. And I remembered that cold smile when he watched them leave. Santos paused, her voice catching. The next entry is dated a week later. September 12th. I can't stay here anymore. Not after what happened to Kevin. He was the youngest of us, only 15. Last night he tried to run away. Just grabbed his bass and started walking toward the road. Elijah caught him before he got a mile. This morning, Kevin was gone. Elijah said he'd had a change of heart and decided to stay in town, get a job, start over. But Kevin's bass was still in the cabin. He never would have left it behind. That's when I knew. Elijah wasn't just keeping us prisoner. He was finishing us. One by one, anyone who tried to leave or asked too many questions just disappeared. I think Jennifer knows too, but she's too scared to admit it. She keeps saying we're safe as long as we don't cause trouble, don't try to leave. Like we're animals in a zoo, alive only at our captor's whim. I won't end up like Kevin. Like Marcus. I won't. The final entry from Elijah's compound was barely legible. September 15th. Tonight I'm leaving. Found an old mining trail that leads into the canyons. If I can make it to the main road, maybe I can flag down a truck, get help. I'm leaving this diary hidden in the cabin. If something happens to me, if I don't make it, at least someone will know the truth about what happened here. Jennifer, Tony, Michael, Lisa, they're choosing to stay. They think they're safe if they don't fight back. They've made their peace with being prisoners. But I'd rather die free in the desert than live as Elijah's captive. If anyone finds this, Elijah Thompson is a criminal. He's been finishing travelers for years, burying them in his backyard. The soul echoes didn't disappear, we were finished. All of us except the ones too scared to try to survive. I don't know if I'll live through the night. But I had to try. Tell our families we never stopped trying to come home. Santos closed the diary, her hands shaking. That's the last entry from the compound. But there are more pages, written later, from different locations. Jake's voice was barely a whisper. She made it out. Dana escaped. Yeah, Santos said. But the question is, what happened to the others who stayed behind? And why didn't Dana ever come forward to tell this story? The answer, they would soon discover, was more heartbreaking than either of them could have imagined. Detective Santos turned to the final section of Dana's diary, where the entries resumed 3 weeks later. The location header had changed again. Abandoned mine shaft, October 8, 1979. She survived her escape, Santos said to Jake. But barely. The first entry after her flight from Elijah's compound painted a harrowing picture. October 8th. I don't know how long I've been wandering. Days blur together out here. My lips are cracked, my water ran out yesterday, and I keep seeing things that aren't there. Mirages, or maybe I'm just losing my mind. I found this old mine shaft yesterday. There's a little water seeping from the rocks, enough to keep me alive. I carved a message on the wall because I don't think I'm going to make it out of here. I didn't mean to survive. Because that's the truth. I wasn't supposed to be the one who lived. Marcus was our leader. Jennifer was the strongest. Tony was the smartest. But somehow I'm the one hiding in a hole in the ground, writing in a diary that no one will ever read. Jake's filming captured Santos's expression as she read the entry that would change everything they thought they knew about the case. October 12th. A miracle happened today. An old woman found me. I was half finished, babbling about Elijah and the compound, when she appeared at the mine entrance like an angel. She had water, food, and the kindest eyes I've ever seen. Her name is Margaret Clearwater, and she lives about 10 miles from here with her son. But when I tried to tell her about what happened, about Elijah and the criminals, she got this strange look on her face. "Honey," she said gently, "there ain't been nobody named Elijah Thompson in these parts for over 20 years. Old Elijah died in 1955. His place burned down not long after." I thought she was confused, but she showed me newspaper clippings. Elijah Thompson, music teacher, died in a car accident in 1955. The compound I described matches his old place, but it's been abandoned ruins for decades. "You've been having heat dreams, child," Margaret said. "Desert can play tricks on your mind when you're dying of thirst." Santos paused, looking at Jake with confusion. "Wait, that doesn't make sense." "The diary entries from the compound, the details about the recording equipment, the finishing." "Keep reading," Jake urged, his camera still rolling. October 15th. Margaret drove me to where I said the compound was. All we found were stone foundations and burned timbers, exactly like she said. No recording studio, no cabins, no fresh graves. Just ruins that have been there for decades. But I know what I saw. I know what happened. Margaret thinks I had a psychotic break from dehydration and trauma. She says sometimes people lost in the desert create elaborate fantasies to cope with hopelessness. She's been caring for me, but I can see she's scared of me. The problem is, I'm starting to doubt myself too. If Elijah's been deceased for 20 years, who was that man? What happened to my friends? Santos's voice grew shaky as she read the next entry. October 20th. Today Margaret showed me something that made my blood freeze. A local newspaper from 3 weeks ago, August 25, 1979. The headline read, "Bus Crash Claims 18 Lives." The article described how a church group from Chicago, the Soul Echoes Gospel Choir, died when their tour bus went off a mountain road during a sudden desert storm. All 18 members finished instantly. The crash happened on July 20th, the same day I wrote about our van breaking down. According to the paper, I died with the rest of them. But I'm here. I'm alive. I'm writing this. Margaret won't look me in the eye anymore. She keeps talking about survivor's guilt and traumatic hallucinations, but I can see she's terrified. She thinks I'm a ghost, or crazy, or both. Jake stopped filming, his face pale. What the hell is going on? Is Dana saying the whole thing was a hallucination? Santos shook her head, reading ahead quickly. No, wait. There's more. This next entry changes everything. October 25th. I found the truth today, and it's worse than I imagined. I convinced Margaret to drive me to the crash site. Took us 3 hours to find it, a twisted piece of metal and scattered debris at the bottom of a canyon. The bus had been hauling a trailer with our equipment. But here's what the newspaper didn't report. There were only 15 bodies recovered from the crash. I found the police report Margaret tried to hide from me. 3 passengers were thrown clear during the crash and wandered into the desert, suffering from head injuries and shock. The report says they were found days later, but that's a lie. We weren't found. We made it to Elijah's compound. The man I knew as Elijah Thompson wasn't a ghost. He was real, but he wasn't who he claimed to be. I think he was someone who'd been living in those ruins, preying on lost travelers for years. Someone who used the deceased man's identity. When Marcus, Carlos, and Keisha tried to leave, they were finished not by the desert, but by this monster. The others who stayed, I think they were finished too, one by one, just like I wrote. I'm the only survivor because I was the only one who escaped. The final entries revealed Dana's impossible situation. November 1st. Margaret finally told me why she's so scared. She looked up the official records. According to every document, Dana Faye Carter died in that bus crash. I don't legally exist anymore. If I come forward with my story, who would believe me? A deceased girl claiming she witnessed finishing at an abandoned compound, finished by a man who's been deceased for 20 years? Margaret offered me a choice: try to reclaim my old life and probably end up in a mental institution, or start over with a new identity. She has connections, people who help folks disappear when they need to. I could become someone else. Live quietly, safely. Honor my friend's memory by staying alive instead of dying trying to prove an unprovable truth. The diary's final entry was dated November 15, 1979. Tomorrow I'd become someone new. Margaret arranged everything. New name, new papers, new life in Oregon where nobody knows Dana Faye Carter ever existed. I'm burying this diary here in the canyon where I first hid. Maybe someday someone will find it and understand what really happened to the Soul Echoes. We didn't run away. We didn't die in some teenage misadventure. We were finished by a monster who the world thinks is already finished. I'm going to live. I'm going to teach music, just like I always dreamed. But every song I sing will be for Marcus, Jennifer, Carlos, Keisha, Tony, Kevin, Michael, and Lisa. 18 kids left Chicago that summer. 15 died in a bus crash. 3 survived and walked into hell. Only one of us made it out. My name was Dana Faye Carter. Tomorrow, I'll be someone else entirely. But I'll carry their voices with me until the day I die. Santos closed the diary, tears streaming down her face. She lived for 33 years under a false identity, carrying this secret alone. Jake's camera captured the moment of devastating realization that Dana Faye Carter had sacrificed her own identity to survive, becoming a ghost to escape a monster who was already supposed to be deceased. 6 months after Jake Morrison's discovery, the Nevada desert was quiet again. But the story of the Soul Echoes had traveled far beyond the canyon where Dana Faye Carter had buried her truth. Detective Santos stood at the edge of what had once been Elijah Thompson's compound, now confirmed through ground-penetrating radar to contain the remains of at least 6 individuals. The forensic teams had finished their work weeks ago, but she still returned here sometimes, trying to understand how such horror could hide in plain sight for over 4 decades. The dental records confirmed it, she said into her phone, updating Jake, who was editing his documentary in Portland. We found Marcus Williams, Carlos Rodriguez, Jennifer Washington, Tony Martinez, Kevin Brooks, and Lisa Chin. All buried exactly where Dana said they would be. The investigation had expanded far beyond the Soul Echoes case. FBI teams were now investigating similar disappearances across the Southwest, following a trail of missing musicians and travelers that stretched back to the 1960s. The man who had called himself Elijah Thompson was likely responsible for dozens of deaths. Any word on who he really was? Jake asked. We may never know for sure, Santos admitted. Best guess is he was a drifter who discovered the abandoned compound and used it as a base of operations. He probably chose the Elijah Thompson identity because the Rael Thompson had no living relatives to question the deception. 3,000 miles away, in a small cemetery in Portland, Oregon, a modest gravestone bore the name Sarah Ellen Mitchell, beloved teacher 1963 to 2012. Fresh flowers lay at its base, placed there by former students who still gathered annually to honor the woman who had taught them that music should be honest, or not sung at all. Margaret Chin, no relation to victim Lisa Chin, was one of those former students. She stood reading the memorial plaque that had been added below Sarah's name. In memory of Dana Faye Carter and the Soul Echoes, whose voices were silenced but never forgotten. She saved my life, you know, Margaret told the reporter interviewing her for Jake's documentary. Not dramatically, like in movies. But I was a shy kid, afraid of my own voice. Ms. Mitchell, I still can't think of her as Dana. She taught me that music was about truth, not perfection. Margaret pulled out her phone and played a recording. She made this for our class in 2010. We were working on a gospel arrangement, and she wanted us to understand the spiritual power of the music. The voice that came through the tiny speaker was older, weathered by decades of secret grief, but unmistakably the same voice that had written in that diary so many years ago. Dana was humming Amazing Grace, with a harmony that seemed to carry the voices of 17 other singers' friends who would never grow old, never achieve their dreams, never come home. "Listen to that," Margaret whispered. "She's not singing alone." She never sang alone. The recording had been part of a larger discovery. After Dana's true identity was revealed, her former colleagues at the Oregon Music Academy had searched through her personal effects, donated to the school after her death. Hidden in an old filing cabinet, they found dozens of cassette tapes, private recordings Dana had made over the years. Dr. Patricia Williamson, the Academy's director, had been Dana's closest friend during her final years. "She told me once that she dreamed about her old friends every night," Patricia explained to the camera. "Said they visited her in her sleep, asking her to keep their music alive." The tapes revealed Dana's secret project. She had spent 30 years recreating the Soul Echoes' entire repertoire from memory, singing all the parts herself. Each song was a memorial, a way of keeping her friends' voices alive when the world thought they were already deceased. "The quality is extraordinary," said Dr. James Harrison, a musicologist studying the recordings. "She captured not just the melodies and harmonies, but the individual vocal characteristics of each member. It's like she carried their souls in her voice." The discovery had led to the creation of The Last Note, Voices of the Vanished, a traveling memorial exhibit that combined the artifacts from Jake's desert discovery with Dana's secret recordings. The centerpiece was a glass case containing the final page of Dana's diary, the words, "One of us escaped, but part of me stayed buried with them. This is my apology," written in her teenage hand. But the exhibit's most powerful moment came when visitors put on headphones and heard Dana's voice, older but still pure, singing Amazing Grace, with the ghostly harmonies of 17 friends who had been silenced at the peak of their youth. Marcus Williams' mother, now in her 80s, had been among the first visitors to the exhibit. She spent an hour listening to Dana's recordings, tears streaming down her face. "That's my baby," she whispered to the volunteer guide. "That's exactly how Marcus sounded when he sang in our church choir. This woman, this Dana, she kept him alive all these years." The families had finally gotten their answers, but also something more precious: proof that their children's music had never truly died. Through Dana's secret recordings, the Soul Echoes were being heard by new audiences, their gospel-funk fusion finally receiving the recognition that had been stolen from them in 1979. Jake's documentary, 18 Voices, premiered at the Sundance Film Festival and went on to win an Emmy for Outstanding Investigative Journalism. But for Jake, the real victory was simpler. "Dana Faye Carter spent 40 years thinking she was a coward for surviving," he said during his acceptance speech. "But she was the bravest person I never met. She carried 18 voices in her heart until the day she died, and now the whole world can hear them sing." In the Nevada desert, where it all began, a simple memorial marker now stands at the coordinates where Jake found Dana's buried backpack. The inscription reads, "Here lie the dreams of 18 young voices, silenced but not forgotten. Their echo remains." And on quiet nights, when the desert wind blows through the canyons, locals swear they can still hear it, the sound of young voices raised in perfect harmony, singing songs of hope and heartbreak that will never fade away. The Soul Echoes had finally come home.